When I was a student at university, my mentor asked me a very interesting question. Quite a strange question, I thought at the time, and I didn't really know what it was relevant to. But he asked me, how can one man deceive an entire nation? Interesting one, eh? At the time, I was thinking along the lines of power. I thought along the lines of, well, if you get people trying to get power for themselves and everybody scrambling for it, then they can be manipulated and deceived through that means. But not everybody wants power. Not everybody's striving for power. I do realise that people like Friedrich Nietzsche and then others like Michel Foucault have written about power and the will to power and how power's about everything, but it isn't. It isn't. That's simply not true. Not everybody has a lust for power. Some people do, for sure. And a lot of people want power, and power can be quite useful. But it isn't the be-all and end-all, like Nietzsche and Foucault assumed it to be oftentimes, or as I infer it to be the case from a lot of their writings that I've read. So what is it then? What is it? What is the answer to that question? Because I'm assuming that there is an answer, right? And I've thought about this a lot. And more recently, in recent times, my line of thinking has changed entirely. Instead of thinking about power, the pursuit of power, the will to power, if you like, to use a Nietzschean phrase, I think more instead about resentment and how actually anybody in the world, doesn't matter what your race is, what your ethnicity is, what your gender is, socioeconomic status, literally anybody can feel resentment about something, because everybody at some point is going to feel pain. Everybody at some point is going to be wronged by another. And as I put it, from pain, there are two paths. There are two paths from pain. You've got one path, which involves being angry about it and being resentful about it and sitting in that, just staying there. Now, not everybody you don't have to stay there, of course. You can feel these feelings of anger and resentment, and you can move across to the other path. But if you stay there, then it can lead you to a very, very dark place. And it can degrade even further and even further and even further. Again, it doesn't have to. You might just sit there and it might just be this niggling thing in the background. But it does mean that you are manipulable because you are focused on the subject of your resentment. If, on the other hand, you take a different path and you choose to find meaning in the pain, the suffering, the wrongdoing that it is that you faced, then instead you can actually use that pain, that wrongdoing or suffering, as a source of learning and a source of growth. It can be paradoxically a blessing instead of a curse. But if you sit in resentment, then it can be a massive stumbling block for you, and it can be a curse rather than a blessing. My point is that it doesn't have to be. It can be a choice. I know, trust me, I know. I've had plenty of reasons to feel resentment, and I have felt resentment in the past about different things, and I've had to work my way through that. And it hasn't been a straightforward yes or no choice. It's not been a binary one or the other, as neat as that. But you can cross over if you have stayed in that resentment trap, so to speak, and you have seen that you've been manipulable by other people talking about this and that and the other that's wound you up. Oh, it's so wrong, it's so unjust. And you got fired up about that, and you've listened to everything that they've said because they're on the same side as you and they're angry as well, and they're going to do something about it as well. That's going to lead to a dead end. All of the stuff that you've gone through, all the pain, is going to lead you to a dead end. Like Martin Luther King said, darkness cannot cast out darkness. Only light can do that. So if we're going to get light in our lives and we're going to cast out the darkness, we have to open ourselves up to the lessons along the way. We have to take the learning that comes from the suffering and from the pain. And once we take those lessons, we can find meaning in these things. We can apply them to ourselves. We can become better. We can use these things like the refiner's fire. The refiner's fire, think about fire and the role that fire plays in refinement in relation to gold and other precious metals and other commodities as well. You think about fire, and fire burns. If you burn yourself, you get hurt. But what fire also does is it reforms. It entirely changes the shape of something. It takes all of the bad stuff, all of the when they're making steel, for example, it takes all of the what's crudely called slag is removed from the iron ore, and then it becomes steel. And that's what needs to happen with us as well as human beings. We need to get rid of all the dross and all the rough edges and everything else. That doesn't happen easily at all. We don't naturally lean into the things that we need to fix, do we? Think about it, we don't. I read a lot of books, and plenty of times the things that I'm reading books on are things I enjoy, things that I want to look at. But it's not necessarily things that I need to look at. It's only when we have these things put right in front of us that we actually say, okay, I need to change something now. I've got something to learn here. I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to grow, and I'm ready to move on. So I hope that's been useful. I hope it's given people something to think about. But like I say, it's fairly broad and it's fairly binary, but I appreciate in reality it's a lot messier than that. When you feel suffering, when you feel pain, when you feel that you've been wronged from somebody else, you have got that choice. Do you want to be resentful and stay there? Or do you want to learn from it? Do you want to learn from the experience and find meaning in that experience and figure out what that means for you in relation to the contribution that you can make and who you can be in relation to others in the world to make it a better place? Again, as Martin Luther King said, darkness cannot cast out darkness. Only light can do that.